Can you see the sunshine? I see the sunshine. The sun is in Sagittarius. Wow. That's a mood shift a little bit. Thank the gods. Hi, I am Brianne Lazinski. I am the creator of Soul's Compass Healing. The reason why I've called it Soul's Compass Healing is because each one of us has a soul inside of us. And our compass is our birth chart. Shows us where we are navigating our life. You put the transits on there and everything becomes crystal clear. And so today I am wanting to say thank you for being here. Visit my website. There's a donate button there if you're finding these videos beneficial. I would highly appreciate a little donation if you have the means to do so. I also offer one-on-one support sessions where I incorporate my social work background, my trauma healing training, and merge that with the uniqueness of your soul and offer a customized counseling session just for you and where you're at. And so if you're interested, my website is linked in the description of this video. Today I am going to be speaking to this new moon in Sagittarius. And before I get into it, I want to just finish something that I started in my last video, and that is to acknowledge the Maori peoples of Aotearoa, New Zealand, who have given the world a stunning example of what it means to stand up as a united peoples and a united culture, even though there's many different Maori iwi tribes. They all joined together and stood in the power and in the dignity of who they are as people. And that is something that the whole world is watching, and that is something that I hope the whole world is cluing in on. The fact that we all actually have that power to stand in who we are and not give in to the homogenized culture, the dominant culture that wants to compress, limit, conform us into something that we are not. And so thank you. Thank you. You know, there was many leaders of the protest, and one of them in particular, and maybe others, I'm not totally sure, but we're saying, you know, the best protest that you can do as they're speaking to their crowds of people, you know, thousands of people showing up, is to be Maori, you know? And so with Mars and Leo opposing Pluto, yeah, yeah, the best protest that you can do is to be yourself. And so, because Sagittarius has a shadow side of wanting to homogenize and make everything the same, make everybody sort of believe the same thing, adhere to the same religions, etc., I think that this is an important way to dive into this report. Because in evolutionary astrology, we dive into the chart through the lunar nodes and Pluto. And my goodness, is there ever some stuff happening with Pluto and the lunar nodes? Okay, so in the name of Jupiter, this moon is ruled by Jupiter, and it's also opposing Jupiter. Jupiter is about the bigger picture perspective. And so I want to take a moment to zoom out. Think back to February 2023, when I was speaking about this Mars-Venus-Pluto conjunction happening in Aquarius. Yes, and I said at the time, this is a time to be, you know, sowing seeds for how we want our relating dynamics to change with ourselves and with others. And it was a glimmer of hope. You know, it was in the sign of Aquarius when Pluto was doing that in and out of Capricorn and Aquarius. It was this like, maybe my relationships can be different. and this spontaneous urge to want to make them different. And if we think even further back to July of 2023, that's when the lunar nodes entered the axis of Aries and Libra. And they will leave that axis, the lunar nodes is going to leave that axis in January, at the beginning of January. So we have like a bit over a month left of the core evolutionary trajectory being the Aries Libra axis, folks. So this is like the time to be integrating what all has happened from now, thinking back all the way to July of 2023. And I don't know about y'all, but my life is very different now versus July 2023. And I want to say to you all that Chiron has been a main proponent of this cycle because Chiron has been in Aries. Who rules Aries? Mars, our north node. And Chiron has been hanging out. He's been spending a lot of time around the 19 degrees Aries point. So if you have anything in your chart around 19 degrees Aries, my heart sincerely goes out to you, and with empathy, because I'm with you. It has not been easy. And I think regardless of if you have Aries in your chart or not, that has fallen somewhere in your chart. And what people are talking about is all of the relationships that we have lost this past year and a half. There's been a lot. There's been a lot of cuts, boundaries having to go up in order to protect ourselves, right? And so, just a sec here. Just want to see if I've gone totally on or off track. Yeah. But what have we gained though? You know? It has been painful. And with Chiron, there is pain because Chiron represents repetitious wounding, right? And that is the nature of trauma. However, Chiron also represents the silver lining. You know, when you're watching a beautiful winter sunset and there's like darker clouds, and then all of a sudden this silver lining kind of shadows around the edges of the clouds. And you're like, wow, the scene is like so dark and dull, you know, it's like 4 p.m. and it's gonna be dark soon, but man, that silver lining, wow, that's really beautiful. And it's that is the medicine of Chiron, and it's nothing to be forced upon. It is nothing that we do as an act of spiritual bypassing. It's not toxic positivity. It's not, okay, there's been, you know, a lot of hardship and heaviness, so let's just sprinkle some toxic positivity on this hardship cake. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that despite the pain, how have you exemplified self-leadership? How have you exemplified self-protection? How have you risen up and reclaimed your authenticity? How have you taken back your power to be you? And I encourage you to actually really think about these prompts, because I think when times get really, really hard, it can be very easy to miss the boat in giving ourselves those pats on the back of, yeah, that was really hard and that was really painful, but what came out of that? I'm getting emotional because it's so real, you know? Like, what came out of that was what? You're still here, you know? You're still here. Are you more connected to your sense of self? Are you more connected to your anger and what it does for you and what it teaches you? You know? Sometimes our soul can become so sick of history repeating itself over and over and over again. Chiron. And although history or these patterns may continue to repeat themselves, as everything is cyclical, spoiler alert, we are different on the inside. We are different on the inside. Every time we go around these same experiences and cycles, it's like we get carved a little bit more into the beautifulness of our true essence, and that changes how we show up to the next cycle of challenges. And so I want to speak to the fact that in February there was a Mars-Venus-Pluto conjunction, so a seeding of a new cycle of everything to do with relationships, issues around codependency and authenticity and freedom and sexuality and power dynamics within relationships. And now we have an opposition, Mars, Pluto, which we're going to be getting a good flavor dose of because Mars is going retrograde and will be opposing Pluto many times throughout the next several months. However, Mars is also opposing Venus as she begins a new cycle with Pluto alongside Ceres. So what I want to speak to here, let's break it down. Mars opposing Pluto. I spoke to this in my last new moon video, but briefly, it's the illumination of instinctual desire connected to the underlying evolutionary intentions of the soul, right? So seeing objectively why we have those desires that we do have. So for an example, and I'll get personal here for a minute, it is my desire to be a single, independent woman. And I know that that is serving my evolutionary journey right now. It's not a desire that I forced upon myself. It's a desire that naturally arose from my instinctual body. And no, it has not been easy, but I know that this is... The weird winter bugs are back, y'all. They like to fly right into my face. Anyways, yeah, it's the underlining reason for it is and we all have these things, right? It's leading us into our next edge, our next evolutionary cycle. And so with this opposition to Venus, now starting a new cycle with Pluto, alongside Ceres, because Venus and Ceres are both going to be entering the sign of Aquarius and meeting with Pluto on December 7th. That's actually the same day that Neptune stations direct as well. So the higher octave of Venus stations direct on this day. This is potent stuff. And I think what this speaks to is that, okay, so there's a few different layers and levels, of course, but our primary relationships that we have in our life are often with souls where we have past life ties to them. And there's unconscious memories that form the basis of our desired nature. And this shows up with just that instinctual gut feeling of that we all have, that we all experience, I'm sure, where it's like, oh, I want to move away from this person, I want to move closer to that person. um, you might not have any idea why, and that's perfectly all right, because most people don't, right? It's a very unconscious process, it's very instinctual. And and what can be happening here is the realization with Ceres there, it's highlighting these themes of death and rebirth, of loss and return, right? So knowing that, yes, we may have lost a lot of friendships and relationships in this past year and a half. However, um, what is being returned to us? And I hope that as Venus enters this new cycle with Ceres and Pluto, we can lean into nurturing ourselves and others as we close these old relating cycles, and as we have hope for renewal. Um, Renewal being that there will be new ways that these cycles will show up, that it's not just going to be the same old story repeating itself, right? And so this is what it means to be doing that hard work of changing our relating patterns. I've been talking about it. I've been a broken record for a year and a half. Next year, I will be talking about different things. But right now, I'm saying the word relating patterns probably for the 50th millionth time or whatever. Um, because this has been our evolutionary trajectory. And so understanding what we have lost is so important to understand what we have gained as well. And with Mars going on his retrograde journey, that's actually beginning on December 6th, will be going until Mars stations direct at 17 degrees Cancer on February 23rd. This is interesting because it's like Mars, that which we are leaning into for our evolution, and culminating and integrating these lessons that have to do with autonomy and self-protection and healthy anger. It's like Mars is like jumping a little bit into Leo, and it's like, hold up, hold up, hold up, I'm gonna take a step back into Cancer. And I think the reason for that is anger. Our culture does not know how to support safe expression of anger, right? We have a really good culture for promoting bypassing of anger and gaslighting people who are angry. Like, oh, would you just please stop being so angry? Or there's nothing to be angry about. I didn't do anything. Or, all of those variations of gaslighting. And then there's people who cause a lot of harm to themselves and others with their anger, because there isn't a knowing of how to do it differently and in a safe way. And those two phenomenon go hand in hand, right? Like, if a culture wants to subjugate and bypass a emotion that is natural to human beings, then it is going to come out in unhealthy ways and cause harm, right? And so I think it's really important that we realize the role that anger plays in our life. One of my mentors says that anger is a bullshit-ometer, and that is totally true. More often than not, if you're feeling angry, there's probably something that you're not going to stand for, right? And happening in your life. And so it is that taking that moment of acknowledging, whoa, okay, there's a line of mine, my personal line, because we all have our own personal lines, our own personal boundary bubbles, right? Of what we will allow into our life and what we will not. This is what we are integrating. North Node Aries. Somebody crosses that line, we're going to get angry. And this opposition to Pluto, as Venus and Ceres meet with Pluto, is telling us, pay attention. Pay attention moving forward as we start this new cycle that has to do with letting go of past relationships which cross that line. We're not going to stand for it. We're not going to stand for it. And this is interesting because this moon, as I said, is ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter is being ruled by Mercury, who's going to be going retrograde on November 25th. Mercury will be squaring Saturn on December 6th and December 27th. Mercury will station direct at our full moon on December 15th as Mercury squares Saturn. But we'll talk about that then. But this Mercury retrograde is interesting because I feel like there's a bigger picture perspective that we are being challenged to realize. And with Pluto and Aquarius, we will start to get this theme of a more objective orientation, right? And so with this Mercury retrograde, I think probably some of the themes that we might be experiencing might be themes around, are things really different? Or are they appearing different on the surface and really there's just a lot of compensating happening? So this is the sneakiness of Mercury's retrograde here that I'm interpreting. That's kind of like the shadow side of Sagittarius is compensation, right? So it's like making things appear as if so many things have changed, and when we are going through an evolutionary cycle that challenges old relating patterns and old relationships and sort of like, takes them up to sort of judgment day, actually. And is like, are you gonna pass or fail of continuing to go on in my life? And this is something that I think this Mercury retrograde is really going to be challenging us to get real on some of these things and to exercise proper judgment of who is actually a healthy person to have in our life and who isn't, and how are my own relating patterns healthy and how are they not, and in what ways am I perhaps lying to myself about um, about how much, in what ways am I lying to myself about how I am showing up in relationship um, that is all good, like seeing the glass half full. So as much as I'm encouraging everyone in this report to honestly give yourselves pats on the back, because this past year and a half has been very challenging, and it has been a centralized focus on relationships and finding our autonomy within relationships, which is extremely difficult in a society that is heavily codependent. And so, yes, I do want us to be acknowledging how far we come and giving ourselves those pats on the back. And at the same time, I want us to be real about where we're at. Be real with ourselves about how far we've come, what the next steps are, and where we want to go. Yeah? And that we can nurture ourselves and one another through this, because that's what it takes. That's what it takes. We are not in this alone. All right. Yeah, I think that's about it. I could talk more, but I'm not gonna. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope that you have an okay time completing this lunation cycle. It has been extremely intense, and so sending you so much love and hoping that this next one is a little bit better for us, eh?